So Forbes conducted a survey recently. In that survey, it was reported that 33% of recruiters don't take more than 2 minutes to make a decision. Instead, they decide within the first 90 seconds whether they're going to hire somebody or not. In my own case, I've noticed this to be true very, very often, even though a lot of people in the audience might say, "What? You should take more time to interview people." Like they say, you shouldn't be judging books by their covers, but I found that in practice, somebody who's good at what they do will easily be able to display it in the first 2 minutes. Just like a YouTube video. You're not going to wait and watch an entire 10-minute YouTube video to judge it. You'll probably judge it in the first 30 seconds. Why do you think it's different for a recruiter, especially when they see tens of people a day, just like you watch tens of videos a day? I also want to run you through an even more staggering statistic. In the US, 76% of rejections are due to unprofessionalism. 76%! And 85% of people actually lie in their resumes. A lot of people think they don't get jobs simply because they're not skilled. I found that even the worst of recruiters and employers are willing to give people a chance as long as they're honest and they show a commitment to working hard in the future. As long as you have potential and the ability to work hard, you can get a shot anywhere, even at the best companies in the world, even if you don't actually have a degree. See, the obvious way to crack a job interview is to be really skilled and to be a great team player. Now, you can't solve those two problems within a week or 2 weeks, right? Building up a skill takes a long time, months, years. It takes practice, it takes training, it takes building a few things. But assume you've crossed that threshold and you already have a skill that's worth telling the world about. In this video, I'm going to tell you 5 ways to actually crack the job interview. The first and simple rule is to be authentic and honest. Now, we think that honesty is something that's not required in the workforce. Now, as you've seen from that stat, 85% of people lie in a resume because they think that they need more to get into a job. Now, as I've told you before, I know several employers and recruiters in several different companies. I can tell you that adding nonsense onto your resume actually makes it harder for people to trust you. Hiring you is a function of the skill you bring and the trust that somebody can put in you, right? And the minute you start lying on your resume, it's really hard to come back from that, especially if you're caught on that. See, even if you make it to the final round and you get to be in front of the employer and the employer asks you questions, if you've lied and they pick that piece out and ask you to say, solve a problem on the one thing that you put on your resume that you don't know, you are now in further trouble. I have always found in my career that lying creates more problems than it solves. I feel like telling an employer the truth, which is that I don't know this, but I'm willing to pick it up. That honesty, that authenticity works in your favor. In fact, it's hard to find talent like that that's willing to work hard, go the extra mile and is aware and honest about where they're at. If you have the awareness to know what you suck at and what you're good at, that is enough to a recruiter. You don't need to be the best at everything. Nobody is. In fact, the older you get, the easier it is for you to know your weaknesses and your strengths. If you are young and you can figure out your weaknesses and your strengths, you are far beyond your peers. The next thing is to actually be confident. Now, a lot of people think that if you're honest and authentic, you have to be underconfident. The truth is you can be both. Maybe you're applying for a design role and you're saying, I don't know how to do Photoshop. And you're saying, well, I'm not good at Figma. And you're confident. You say, hey, I'm not good at Figma, but I also do know I'm very good at Photoshop. Having that clarity and that confidence goes miles. So authenticity always works with confidence. You should know what you're good at and what you're bad at. Oftentimes, it's the confident person that wins the role, but I've seen that it's the confident, aware person who wins the role. It's not just confidence, it's confidence and awareness and authenticity that wins you a role. The next thing is that remember that people, even though they want to look at data and numbers, people only listen to stories. Like I told you, a recruiter will make a decision within the first 90 seconds. You need to tell a 90-second story, almost like you making an Instagram reel or a YouTube short. Within that time period, you need to communicate everything you've done in your life. Now, some people, especially people who haven't done too much in their life, and you've seen this from their LinkedIn bios, they have things like, TEDx attendee, angel investor, number of file and hundreds of random things in their resume, right? So instead of you explaining all of that in like a 10-minute saga, if you can make a 90-second or 60-second story about you and why you got here in the first place, that would be crazy. My name is Varun. I was one of the youngest entrepreneurs in India to have raised venture capital. I built a recruitment startup, sold it in 2017, wrote a Bloomsbury published book in 2018, and ran a successful services company from 2018 to 2020. In 2020, I ran Avalon, which started off as an edtech company and today is a community platform. That's it. I don't have to say any more, right? This in itself is enough context. It's like 4 or 5 things, enough context. Whereas in reality, I've done so many things in between this, right? I've invested in some companies, I've tried YouTube. I don't even mention any of that, right? Because it's not necessary for that person to know. If the person was hiring me for, let's say, the role of a content creator, then I wouldn't even mention a lot of the things on the business side. Maybe my book becomes more relevant, right? Because it's more closely associated with content. Maybe my YouTube channel becomes more relevant because it's more associated with content. Be relevant and do it in 60 seconds. Tell a story that a person wants to listen to. If you can put in that effort and do it for reels, you can do it for a recruiter or an employer sitting in front of you. Now, there's a saying, don't hate the player, hate the game. Now, I have a variant of that saying, like my own version of it, which is when you go work at a company or interview at a company, don't just do research about the company, do the research about the player. The person who's interviewing you comes with their own biases. They have their own way of looking at the world, they have their own interests, and they have things that they might not like. Now, if you do your due diligence, if you go to LinkedIn, spend some time, talk to some people, you can actually find out what the interview structure is like. The person that's going to be interviewing in round 1, the person that's going to be interviewing you in round 2, and so on and so forth. If you open glassdoor.com right now, you can actually see all the levels of interview in a company, what other people's experiences were, and what tasks they were given. You can actually do your research and go in. And I feel like less than doing the research about the company, which a lot of you do, you know, well, what the company does and what kind of seating they have and when their holidays are. Instead of knowing all that, know the recruiter or the employer and what they want. The interviewer is your target, and you must use social engineering to find out what they like and what they don't like, because most of the time, if somebody's interviewing you, you are going to be working in their team. So you better know them and you better please them. The last one is know your fundamentals. I can't recommend this step enough. As long as you know your fundamentals, it's hard for you to be shaken. You might not know Figma or the newest design tool, but as long as you know one tool and you know the fundamentals of that tool, it's easy for you to transfer those skills from one tool to the other. It works the same in any industry. If you take computer programming, you could learn one language and you might be interviewing for another language, but as long as you know the fundamentals and you're very clear to the interviewer that I don't know this new language, but I know the fundamentals of programming, that should be good enough. And I'm a programmer, so this is advice that every other programmer would give you. As long as you know the fundamentals and you're honest about what you don't know, every recruiter or interviewer will know that these skills are transferable. So all you have to do is prove the hard work and the commitment and the potential to be able to transfer these fundamentals from one tool to the other so that you fit into the job that you're applying for. That's it for me. Bye.